And the third thing is creating IPOA as a commission and not an authority. So those are the only substantial proposals that it gives. But if you go to the very back of the BBI report, it shows a matrix, a strategy matrix on what should be done in order to realize the aspirations of Kenyans for a better security sector reform. And at that point in time, they speak on various issues. They speak around enacting of certain laws, particularly laws on victim protection and victim protection trust fund, the coroner's bill, which has been presented already. So you find that the BBI is saying things that we already have. The issues that it raises are issues that we have raised systematically over a period of years as persons who are involved in security sector reform in the civil society. So we do not see any real new issue or any nuanced approach to solving this. So to answer your question around what we can do, I would say that as Kenyans, we should agitate for a more inclusive process towards a better output. So we shouldn't be looking at a signature collection process now. We should be saying, fine, this is the BBI report, you have given it to us, we have now read it, these are our proposals. We will not engage in this other process until we hear what you're going to do about our various proposals. So that would be my approach, because I do not think in good conscience that we should engage in a constitutional review process with certain glaring loopholes still in place. That is my 2 cents. The other thing would, of course, be to go to court,
Sure.
to challenge the whole process in court. Okay. Is there anything else you would like to know? You know, now you have full control of over the presentation.
You and the other participants, it's so unfortunate that we're all alone. You know, when we are more, we get diverse views.
Yeah, that's true. So another thing that, okay, I think I can run through a few issues that are also very emergent that we have noted and of course are raising concern about, which is the conversion of the National Police Service Commission to the Kenya Police Council. So why we are raising concern about this new structure is because the Kenya Police Council will have, or rather will be chaired by the Cabinet Secretary in charge of that ministry. So in this particular instance, we're talking about the Cabinet Secretary, Interior and Coordination of National Government, Matiang'i. And the composition entails that it will be chaired by the CS, the PS will be a member, the Permanent Secretary will be a member, 2 senior officials from the National Police Service appointed by the President will be members, and the IG will be a member. The replacement of the National Police Service Commission with an institute that looks state-controlled is also something we should be worried about. So you have a composition of 5 people, 5 of whom are directly reporting to their appointing authority, who is the president, or rather 4 of whom, and then 1 person is the command officer. So you have a situation whereby the IG is reporting to the Cabinet Secretary in normal procedure, but now they're in a committee, and this committee is in charge of oversight and control of a body that ought to be independent. So you find that we are seeing a situation whereby, unfortunately, and I say this with a lot of care, Kenya will end up going backwards to a position whereby the state controlled the police.
Concern because it's like this, the current BBI is taking us back to where we've come from in terms of maybe agencies being placed under the state. So we wouldn't be having the independence that we have enjoyed a few years back.
That's true. And the idea and the vision of the National Police Service is that it is completely independent. The decisions taken by the Inspector General of Police shouldn't be questioned by anyone other than a committee of parliament or Senate. So he shouldn't be in a position whereby if he's overruled by a particular group of people, he will bend. So you see that this current council is problematic in its very composition. The other thing is the National Police Service Commission, when it was introduced, the reason for its introduction was actually to professionalize the system, to ensure that the recruitment, training, transfer, housing of police officers was done in a very systematic way. It is basically the welfare institute of the HR component of the police. So you find that by disbanding it and creating the Kenya Police Council, which does not have a specific mandate on recruitment and training of police officers, and therefore transferring those powers to the police through the Inspector General's office, you are clawing back on the gains that you made to professionalize the service. So you find that for every system to work, you have to have people who are focused squarely on the welfare, training, growth of the people in the service. Now you're putting all that and shifting all that work back to the Office of the Inspector General of Police, who will also have the mandate of ensuring that Kenya is safely guarded, civilians are interacting with the police in a friendly manner. So you find that this is an issue that ideally should have been dealt with in another office, but now has been brought back to the office of the IG. We hope that because of now that, the transfer of his powers back to the office of the IG, that he will be capacitated, like a proper office will be created to do the functions that are done at the National Police Service Commission. Because if not, you will end up, again, going back to the system where we used to have police officers being randomly transferred, police officers being randomly recruited. There is no oversight around why a particular instance is happening, the compensation issue becoming a bit derailed because of the fact that, unfortunately, the office of the IG sometimes really touches on hot topic issues, and therefore you might find friction between certain entities, so that would not be a priority. So even the housing and health component, insurance, these are very many issues that are now being directed to the office of the IG owing to the disbandment of the NPSC. So for me, what I see, or for the institution that I work with, ICJ Kenya, what we see is that we need to ensure that there's proper legislation around how all the services, all the things that used to be done at the NPSC will be transferred. I see that we have gotten a few more people who, Rahab, I see your comment. Unfortunately, I am the one presenting, but I'm sure there's someone in the background who is in tech who will be able to assist you migrate. So I'm sure someone from TISA has noted. But down here, there are the breakout rooms. So if you click the breakout rooms, I think you can choose another breakout room. Yes. All right. So that was one of the key concerns that we have noted. Thank you for everyone who has joined. Unfortunately, we have moved in a bit longer, but in case you have any questions, you can let me know. So the theme of the conversation we are having is twofold. We are discussing BBI and security and BBI and judicial independence. The first thing we have discussed, we had started when the clock ran, but the things that we have discussed in BBI and security sector reform are the various proposals that have been made in the constitutional amendment process. My name is Julie Wayua Madeka. I work at ICJ Kenya. So the various things that we have discussed are, first, issues appertaining to the three major constitutional amendments appertaining to security sector, which is the merger of the constituent units of the NPS, the National Police Service Commission being disbanded and a Kenya Police Council being created in its place, and the establishment of IPOA as a commission as opposed to an authority. So those are the three major proposals that have been made in the BBI report, and also the constitutional amendment bill that is annexed to the report. So the first thing is the merger of the constituent units had already started from 2018. This is a process that has been ongoing, and as such, the proposal seeks to harmonize an already ongoing process and therefore center the command of the police to just one person, who is the Inspector General of Police. This is a proposal we welcome because it is basically just harmonizing an already ongoing process. The next proposal is the replacement of the National Police Service by the Kenya Police Council. This is a proposal that potentially could be problematic because of the fact that the National Police Service Commission has the responsibility of recruitment, training, compensation, deployment, and performance of police officers to ensure that these practices match international best practice. So the fact that the commission has been disbanded and these functions have been taken to the Kenya Police Council, we are not even sure if that's the case, is quite concerning because these are structures that have already been established, and as such, we wonder whether the structures already established and the professionalization mechanisms already ongoing will continue under the Office of the Inspector General of Police. The next thing we see is that the Kenya Police Council, by its very composition, is very problematic. The reason we say this is because the council will be chaired by the Cabinet Secretary in charge of internal security, the Principal Secretary in charge of internal security, two members of the National Police Service Commission, two members of the National Police Service who are appointed by the President from the service, and the Inspector General of Police. This therefore presents another oversight mechanism within an oversight mechanism for the Inspector General of Police. It further weakens and undermines his office, and as such, the proposal to have the Kenya Police Council is quite problematic. We will be having question and answer sessions shortly, but I will be looking at the chat section for those people who want to engage as we go on. The other, and I think the last proposal that has been given as regards to the police is changing the IPOA from an authority to a commission, an independent constitutional commission. This is a welcome proposal because it underscores the seriousness of policing oversight, and as such, as a fully fledged constitutional commission, we will be able to hopefully oversight the police better. Now, here is the challenge. Currently, as it is established, police persons often do not follow the directives of IPOA. So now we are asking the question, if they do not follow the directives as is, does it mean that they will follow the directives of the commission? What we are asking is, do we need the authority to become a commission, or it can stay an authority? And as such, don't we need then to have a bigger conversation around the appreciation of IPOA's mandate by the police officers, as opposed to even creating it as a commission? Because that would solve the issue, but something we can discuss in the plenary. The other things we noted that the BBI did not speak about is whether the Inspector General can incur an expense, because for the longest time, civil society have advocated for IAE to be held at the Inspector General's office because ideally he's the operating officer. So it is silent around that as well. The other thing is that we note that the BBI is also very quiet around community policing, which is something that is in the Constitution as well as Section 96 of the National Police Service Act. We note that it highlights slightly on Nyumba Kumi, but Nyumba Kumi and community policing are completely different. So it really does not speak to that. The other thing that we do note is that the BBI really, in regards to security, doesn't look at the past injustices that have been committed, and as such offer proposals based on the various reports that as a country we have developed. We have developed the TGRC, the WACI report, the Ransley report. These have crucial proposals that ought to have been considered in the development of the BBI proposals for amendment on security sector. So the fact that these were not considered is quite alarming, because those various reports have very proper recommendations for reform. We are excited about the fact that the BBI actually speaks to two pieces of legislation that we have advocated for, which is the Protection of Victims Trust Fund, as well as the Coroner's Bill, which is currently at the Office of the Attorney General for assessment, and also for operationalization. So these are two pieces of legislation that we do believe can really improve the service delivery in our country. So we look forward to that. The other thing that we note does in the BBI is that it has actually prioritized the welfare of police. If you go to the bottom of the BBI, there are certain security sector recommendations that have been captured in the implementation strategy, which also speak to what the vision is of the bigger security sector reform agenda. So in that, they speak towards professionalizing the recruitment procedure. They don't say how, they just say they wish to professionalize the recruitment procedure by advocating for the integration of digital processes. They also say that there needs to be the introduction of key performance indicators for police officers that are captured and are used in the promotion and interview process. There is also the need to train the persons who offer training to police officers for them to be better placed. There is also an emphasis on the reward mechanism for police officers who are exemplary at their work. More often than not, we cast a lot of blame to police officers for the work that they do, but there are certain exemplary police officers who do their work very well. However, there is no established reward scheme. So the BBI actually talks about that. The BBI then actually talks about mental health for police officers. And with that, it recommends the operationalization of the Coroner's Bill. It speaks to ensuring that there's mental health capacity in Ministry of Health. It speaks to the fact that there is need to introduce counseling, chaplaincy services to persons to the service generally, for them to be able to access these services. So those are the things that they speak about: police performance, mental health, and well-being. And they also give emphasis to the fact that there is need to prioritize gender-based violence, sexual violence by proper resourcing. They want to introduce, and I really did appreciate and like this proposal, they want to introduce conflict resolution, negotiation, and counseling skills in the curriculum at all levels for police officers. This might seem like a very basic recommendation, but you find that a lot of the issues that we have as a country require proper de-escalation mechanisms. And these, if inculcated from the various steps throughout education, can be better placed, because in that case, people will be able to de-escalate issues better. So I've just given a snapshot of the various things that the BBI proposes for police. What I can say is some of the proposals are good. The only concern is that they could have been more. They could have been more. So I want to take a pause there, take a few questions around that, because the next conversation we'll be having is on judicial independence. And that is a complete shift from what we're discussing. So I don't want the various two issues to be interchanged. So I think we can take a few questions on policing, security, and the reform agenda. I will now look at the chat box. I don't know if we have a hands up section here. Yeah, if you go to breakout room participants, if you click the participants box, you can raise hand. So if you wish to raise your hand, I'll be able to see you and call on you for you to speak. It's an open air, it's an open space. So if you have any questions, please do let me know. All right, Jack Agola, kindly unmute and ask your question.
Thank you for this chance. I will first want to thank you for taking your time to review some bit of what you already presented, despite the fact that you came in late. My question on BBI and police, one of the key challenges that we've been facing as a country, let me just say, has been an issue of police brutality. We've seen police officers committing crimes and walking scot-free, and to some extent, even killing citizens. Then the next thing that you're seeing is that these police officers are being transferred to other police stations and even being covered up by the other police officers. It's a big problem to us citizens, and of course for us in civil society, because one of the things that probably we might be doing is that we will be having those kind of a peaceful demonstration and what have you. So how is BBI trying to solve the issue of police brutality and bringing that kind of responsibility in the police service, because people are dying in the hand of police officers. And if we are going to come up with a review or maybe a different framework, then how is BBI going to ensure that citizens who have suffered under police brutality get justice, and the police officers being caught in these kind of issues also are served justice? Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Hi, very good presentation. And I like the last 2 points you've talked about gender. My name is Roslyn Oro. I work for Rona Foundation that champions widow rights in Siaya County. One of the key areas, and we've been working closely with the gender desk police in Siaya, is the lack of response or weak response on gender-based violence cases. And so there's a very huge need to strengthen the gender desk police and especially the male police officers. So I wanted to understand, and I love the idea of the conflict resolution, because most of the cases, 70% of the cases in Siaya County are either discrimination, are either disinheritance, or are either harmful cultural practices, which are not even having a policy or law, especially if you look at the widowed cultural practices. So as an organization, we are looking at what are the policy gaps in the gender issues, especially with the BBI. Is the BBI even inclusive, especially in terms of security response and police gender desk response into the needs of the widowed community in Kenya? And so I'm really keen, how does the BBI respond to that? Is it going to the security issue? Is it going to strengthen the gender desk? Or is it going to find innovative ways to make sure that that desk is really completely active?
Okay. Thank you for that. Any other question? Follow Ms. Orwa's procedure, just unmute and turn on your video and ask your question, please. It's an open space. All right, I will first respond to the two questions that have been posited. What do we do about police brutality? How does the BBI speak to police brutality? So one of the things that the BBI has done, specifically addressing police brutality, is creating the Kenya Police Council to be the oversight authority on all matters policing. So in a way, you could infer that with the oversight created by the Kenya Police Council, there might be better management of errant police officers. But you see, the thing is, we are inferring. The next thing you could say is by identifying and creating an independent commission, independent constitutional commission for the IPOA, that we are now looking at these issues in a whole different way, that they are now going to be subjected to better supervision, and these issues will be addressed in a more serious and faster mechanism. But then the question still remains, what is it that IPOA could do different as a commission that it has not done currently as an authority? So indeed, there is need to recruit highly. There is need to allow for forensic investigation on matters appertaining to police brutality. There is need to actually create legislation around enforced disappearance and extrajudicial killings, which is something that we have advocated for, because you find that there are certain crimes that are only encapsulated by creating certain legislation, and we do not have that for now. So yes, it's a very sad situation, and unfortunately, and if I may say, the BBI does not actually solve the issue of police brutality, both as victims and as perpetrators. So indeed, there is cause for concern, because that is the issue that is underlying for many Kenyans, and that has not been addressed significantly by BBI. Now, onto the gender desks, the BBI actually speaks towards creating and emphasizing on sexual and gender-based violence as an issue of greater concern. And it says that in its strategy, it will actually put in place various mechanisms. Let me just reference those three. Evaluate legislative and administrative frameworks to identify the gaps around SGBV and gender-based issues. Secondly, train police officers on GBV, both handling citizens and handling their fellow police officers. You find that indeed, police officers actually go through gender-based violence. So the issue has been that they conceal the instance from their fellow police officers owing to the stigmatization that it causes. So also training internally how to handle reports from your fellow police officers. The other thing it has done is also providing safe and private spaces for reporting sexual gender-based violence, especially in police cells, in police stations. This proposal has been there. And that's why a lot of us are arguing that the BBI is reinventing the wheel. We already have these proposals and already have created mechanisms towards implementing this. So the question that we hope the BBI will address is, what are the shortcomings with the already enacted processes, and how do we ensure that they are strengthened? Because these are not nuanced proposals. And also providing gender desks. Providing gender desks, we have had this proposal for almost 5 years plus, and some of them have worked in specific places, but others have not. So what is the real issue there? And can the BBI propose a complete overhaul of how the police investigation, DPP, and the judiciary handle matters of sexual gender-based violence to make it more pressing, and to also even create specialized courts? Those are the proposals we would have hoped came from the BBI report, but unfortunately did not come. I hope I've also addressed your question, Madam Orwa. All right, with consensus and silence on the floor, we are still having technical challenges getting our colleague, Mr. Martin Mavenjina, to give brief highlights on, thank you, to give brief highlights on issues of security. But once he joins us, I think he'll take through issues of security and issues of judicial independence together. So I know that a lot of us have had civil society raise great concern over what the BBI is doing towards judicial independence, what the BBI has proposed to weaken the judiciary. So I wish to now look at the various provisions that are presented in the BBI proposal and look at each of them with what each of the proposals potentially mean for judicial independence and strengthening. So the premise of judicial independence, as per espoused in the BBI, is on accountability. So the whole narration in reform of the judiciary is anchored on judicial accountability. So it states that the judiciary should be accountable in a clear manner to the sovereign and will of the people. It therefore proposes to introduce the office of the Judiciary Ombudsman, who will sit on the JSC and develop a report that is presented to the president. The other thing it does is propose that we need specialized courts to deal with two issues that are emerging: corruption and terrorism. So the latter proposal is okay. We do need more courts to deal with terrorism and corruption. Terrorism, because of the specialized nature of terrorism cases and because of the weightiness that they carry. Corruption owing to the prevalence of corruption cases over the last 3 years. I think Kenya has actually sunk lower than ever before in terms of corruption issues. So yes, we do need specialized courts with equipped judicial officers to deal with corruption matters. That is a welcome proposal. Now let's go into the meat of the substance. The first thing it states is that election petitions not concerning the president should end at the Court of Appeal level. This is okay because unfortunately what we have witnessed is the fact that a lot of the cases end up going all the way through to the Supreme Court, which takes an inordinate amount of time to conclude, and as such, persons who are waiting for this decision are waiting for a very long time. So if you have a governor who is contesting his election from the political parties disputes tribunal to the High Court to the Court of Appeal, you therefore welcome, Martin. I'm glad you're on board. I am on judicial independence. I will allow you an opportunity to critique both security and judicial independence, but karibu sana. So,
thanks, Julie.
If you have a situation whereby the judiciary is going to be the arbiter of all matters concerning elections, and you have almost every other case concerning a governor going all the way through to the Supreme Court, you therefore really burden the bench of the Supreme Court with a lot of matters that actually could be decided at the Court of Appeal. So yes, this is a proposal that is, I think, welcome. However, we really need to understand what mechanisms are going to be in place to ensure that all matters listened to and determined at the Court of Appeal are presented in the best way possible. So the next thing that the BBI has proposed is the harmonization of the term of the Deputy Chief Justice to that of the Chief Justice. So we note that the Chief Justice's term is, I believe, until retirement or a term of 10 years. So what this then does is it ensures and prevents a situation whereby the Deputy Chief Justice will be the Deputy Chief Justice for a period over and above the term of the CJ. For a few legal scholars, we have seen the mischief that is currently being perpetuated by this particular amendment, but at the same time, we see the potential for great Supreme Court judges, so that after a specific period, the Deputy Chief Justice will then step down to become a fellow Supreme Court Justice member, a fellow Supreme Court Justice member, and then an election for the office of the DCJ will be instituted, so that the person will not be removed from the office of this Supreme Court, will not be removed as a judge of the Supreme Court, however, will cease to be a Deputy Chief Justice if they have finished their term. I know various people are looking at it in the lens of people are being curtailed. However, I think it allows for smooth transitions from a person being an administrative officer, which is also a part of what the Deputy Chief Justice is, an administrative officer, to also being a member of the Supreme Court bench. And it also ensures that we don't have particular persons sitting in perpetuity in those particular offices. The next thing we have is the term of the President of the Court of Appeal and the High Court being both reduced to 5 years singular term. So what used to happen previously is that the president of the Court of Appeal and the president of the High Court could be elected for 5 years and also re-elected. That has since changed with the proposal to limit it to 5 years. I don't think that's a substantial proposal, but it is going to allow for greater leadership and growth and mentorship within the service. So that's not a bigger problem. Now, I wish to pass over one proposal, which is the judicial ombudsman, and conclude with that one by moving to the qualification of judges. Judges have had their qualifications reviewed. So they want the Supreme Court justices to be persons who have 20 years experience, Court of Appeal 15 years, High Court 10 years. The aspiration is that persons who are of such qualifications will be able to hold those offices will be able to ascend to those offices better. So the more qualified you are as a judge, the better you are suited for certain positions in the various leadership cadres in the judiciary. It is a welcome proposal. However, we do not also think that it really matters because the current qualifications set out in the current constitution are very adequate. So really, increasing 5 years over a period of 15 years doesn't really say that this person will be better placed to do the function that they are doing currently. So it's a proposal that is neither here nor there, but indeed, we will, if it does pass, it's okay. There are various contentious proposals now. So these are the ones that I want to speak about. And they are 3. The 3 contentious proposals are: 1, elected advocates to the JSC should not practice. Now, this is a discussion that has been ongoing since the first constitution of the office of the first constitution of the Judicial Service Commission, which had members such as Ahmed Nasir and Mwangangi, the first 2 elected officials. And the issue started then because many people perceived that an advocate sitting at the JSC posits themselves as someone who has influence over judicial officers. So if you have someone who sits in the recruitment of judicial officers and the promotion of judicial officers, how then do you listen to a matter presented by this person and not feel inclined to favor them? So it is an ongoing conversation. For now, I think it is going to be a conversation that will definitely be at the minds of the Law Society of Kenya and other institutions, because what does this mean in terms of livelihood generation and sustainability versus the premise of independence and impartiality? So we have to weigh those two. So that's one controversial proposal. The second one is increased functions of the Judicial Service Commission to also discipline judicial officers, including judges. Now, why I said this is controversial is because there's already a laid out procedure in the Constitution around the dismissal of judges as per Article 168. So this proposal to discipline judicial officers would have to be looked at as what is an issue that is worth being disciplined at the Judicial Service Commission and does not warrant removal of office. If you suspend a judge, what does that do to the perception of impartiality and properness before the citizen? How do you manage this in such a way that it still ensures that there is confidence within the judiciary? So this is a very hot topic issue, because what are the allowable offenses that should be prosecuted and disciplined at the JSC level? You see, so this is something that we need to really interrogate, because if it is left as is, then you open up issues of, is this an issue that ought to have a judge removed, or is this an issue that ought to have a judge suspended? Legal scholars such as Mavenjina and Dimas will comment on that, but for now, I think that is a very hot topic issue. Now, the last one is on the creation of the Office of the Judiciary Ombudsman. Now, this office has caused quite a stir across Kenyans. So the first thing to say is the Office of the Ombudsman does exist. It exists and is currently within the Office of the Deputy Chief Justice. There is another office of the Ombudsman which exists, and it exists within the Council and Administration of Justice. So both these offices have the mandate to receive complaints from the public and present reports and channel to the relevant authority and seek clarification from the relevant authority on what is happening. For example, if you make a report to the Commission on Administration of Justice, they will then write to the judiciary seeking clarification on why there's a particular case that a public member has complained about that is stalling, why a certain judicial officer is behaving in a certain way as a member of the public has reported. So these mechanisms already exist. However, the proposal that is currently there seeks to introduce this office as an independent office that will be handling complaints on judicial processes from members of the public. The proposal still states that this is the new Article 172. And now under Article 171, it states that the person who is receiving these complaints and handling these complaints will also be a member of the Judicial Service Commission. So you will increase the membership of the Judicial Service Commission by also increasing and including the Office of the Ombudsman. From the face of it, it looks like it's a wonderful idea to create the Office of the Ombudsman, and there's no doubt. The only concern that we are having with the Office of the Ombudsman is the lack of separation of powers, owing to the fact that the proposal recommends that the Office of the Ombudsman is a person who should be nominated by the President, taken for vetting before the National Assembly, and then approved by the President. This is the only contention we are having. The selection process is very vague. It opens up to a presidential appointee being in charge of dealing with matters of the judiciary, which is a violation of separation of powers. The particular ombudsman will have to make a report every year to the president after the end of the financial year, which again violates the principle of the separation of powers between the various the various arms of government. So what we have proposed is that the Office of the Ombudsman, wonderful idea. However, let's create it in a different manner. For example, let's introduce a select panel of judicial sector actors represented from the JSC, the Attorney General, the Director of Public Prosecution, the Law Society of Kenya, the National Commission on Human Rights, Public Service Commission, and the Council of Governors, a proper selection panel who will look at who will look at the interview process, who will look at applications from various people who wish to aspire to that office. The person who will be selected from that panel is then forwarded for vetting at the National Police Service, at the National Assembly, at the National Assembly, and that name is then submitted to the President for formal appointment, so that the process is also transparent. The process is also owned by judicial service actors, judicial actors, and persons in the justice chain. We also propose that the report made by the Ombudsman should not necessarily be tabled to the President. It should actually go through the National Council and Administration of Justice, which is the body that has all these justice sector actors in one, so that collectively they can look at the issues that are raised, whether JSC appropriately addressed them, what were the gaps, and then propose a roadmap for the way forward. So yes, I know that indeed there is need for oversight of a judicial function, but this might not be the best way to go about it because it further derogates from the principles of separation of powers. So that is a snapshot of all the amendments that are currently proposed in the BBI appertaining to the judiciary. I look forward to your comments, but before then, I wish to introduce Martin Mavenjina, who is our discussant, who has had the opportunity to look through what I am presenting previously, and maybe to give 2 or 3 comments around what he believes the BBI has done for security sector and judicial independence. Over to you, Martin.
Okay. Thank you, Julie. Good morning, colleagues. I am Martin Mavenjina. I work with the Kenya Human Rights Commission as the program advisor for transitional justice. So before I just take this opportunity just to comment on the excellent and exceptional presentation by Julie here, Yeah, I want first and foremost to thank you for the very comprehensive presentation on the implications of BBI on security and also the judicial sector. And in the same vein, I'll just add on. So I would start by the first proposition of, even before I start, when you look at how BBI was done, of course, there are a number of questions on how the process was done itself, but specifically when it comes to issues national security within Kenya, it does not seem to, the recommendations that are brought about by BBI do not seem to cure the ailing problems that are not being addressed within the Kenya security apparatus. For instance, I'll just give an example. When you look at the 2010 constitution, it changed Kenya's police service, Kenya's then police force into a service. Now, 20 years down the road, there's not been any efforts by government to actually sensitize there's actually a rebranding of some sorts. So when you look at the propositions, the current proposals by BBI, you would expect this to be something that that would be addressed, because the image of the police is still tainted. Now, this is something that is not included in this document. So it makes you wonder, are these proposals actually meant to take us forward in as far as security sector reforms are concerned, or they're meant to be retrogressive? In my opinion, I think they're retrogressive. The second one, which I believe Julie mentioned, was the creation of a police council. So if you create a police council and you look at the provisions under Article 255 that create the office of the IG, they indirectly undermine his independence, because the Constitution provides for the appointment of the Inspector General of the Police, who will actually who will be tasked with commanding the National Police Service. Now, if you create a police council that is composed of other players like the CS Interior or the PS of Interior, then you indirectly undermine his independence to actually command the National Police Service. If you look at it from a flip side of view, could you just imagine, let's say, creating a National Assembly whereby the National Assembly cannot be, or the Speaker of the National Assembly cannot be tasked with actually running the House, or even the President, whereby the President has to run the country in sync with somebody else. So it undermines the IG's independence. But most important, and what I found most odd, was the proposal of appointing actually 2 senior police officers. So the questions that would arise is, so how do you actually appoint these 2 police officers? Because it opens a Pandora's box whereby you actually appointed either at the whims of the president, and I don't think such an appointment would actually be made on merit. So it takes us back to, in my opinion, still that proposal is also still retrogressive. And then in terms of the other propositions of getting rid of the National Police Service Commission, my honest opinion is, if you get rid, if you come up with proposals that actually say that we do away with the National Police Service Commission, and you actually leave the hiring of recruitment of police officers to the National Police Service itself, then in my opinion, it's self-defeating, because you can't be an employee. The whole process itself will lack merit. And I think the framers of the Constitution back then took a lot of time in coming up with these independent bodies. The other critical issue, the critical role that NPSC plays is even around issues of disciplining our police officers. Now, if you remove this independent role of having police officers actually disciplined, other than the IG by being disciplined by the Commission itself, I don't think you'd have you'd have an effective way of holding errant police officers to account, because for information, to date, we know that yes, the law provides for a mechanism whereby police officers, errant police officers, are usually reported to the IG, but I mean, nobody has actually seen what exactly happens to these police officers. So there are no reports from the IG's office. So that is why, in my opinion, I think it would be critical still to have the National Police Service Commission still is still in place. So in my opinion, that proposition still takes us back to pre-2010. And then lastly, still on security sector reforms, the aspect of establishing an independent oversight body for police officers within the National Police Service itself is, to me, sounds more like of duplicity, because we already have the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. And for your information, there are only 3 independent policing oversight authorities in Africa. There's one in Nigeria and there's one in South Africa. And I think IPOA is doing an excellent job. So to come up with an independent body that oversights police within the police itself, I think is self-defeating. So those are my comments in as far as police is concerned. In terms of the propositions that are to do with the judiciary, first and foremost, I think the framers of the Constitution, even the principles of separation of powers, are clear-cut. We can't be in a scenario whereby, when it comes to the judiciary, then we have the executive and the legislature actually trying to see how the judiciary's affairs are run. So, in my opinion, still, I think those recommendations are not what the judiciary has right now, and what the judiciary needs right now. When you look at these propositions, the things that are ailing the judiciary have never been addressed. 99% of Kenyans seek legal redress through courts of law. Now, when you look at what you would have expected BBI to address, I would have expected BBI to address issues of a case backlog. Now, case backlog, of course, is brought about because we have a shortage of judges on the bench as it is right now. So ideally, if BBI had come up with proposals whereby we could increase the number of judges, then that would have been an acceptable recommendation. But you look at the current recommendations, they don't seem to actually be strengthening the judiciary. And this is coupled with the fact that we know that the president has not appointed 40 judges, because one already passed on. So we are still short. So there's a huge problem of backlog. And when you look at the current proposals on BBI, they do not seem to address the issue of backlog, which is a problem that has been with Kenya's judiciary for a long period of time. The other issue I'd like to point out is on is in as far as funding for the judiciary is concerned. Now, when you look at the propositions that have been highlighted by Julie, and when you look at the BBI document itself, it does not seem to address the issue of funding. So you have to ask yourself, so the current propositions by the framers of BBI, would they really enhance judicial independence, access to justice for the common wananchi? Those are the critical questions that we would all have to ask ourselves here. And in my honest opinion, I do not think the proposals to the judiciary actually strengthen it or address those two critical problems. There are a number of other issues that I can highlight in as far as the judiciary is concerned. I mean, by now, all counties should have judicial circuits. Actually, all counties in Kenya should have judicial circuits, but that has not been actualized. So those are things that we would have hoped BBI would address. But if they can't address these critical issues, then I don't think these propositions in as far as the judiciary is concerned would make the judiciary stronger. In my opinion, I think they make the judiciary actually much weaker and dance to the whims of the executive. Thanks, Julie, and over to you.
We were discussing something, whether to throw the questions at you first or to ask Dimas to come on board and speak to the various committee proposals that have been laid out over time, and whether the BBI actually addresses some of them. So a quick reference to the Ransley report, Waki report, which other report, the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation report, whether there has been any linkage between those reports and the BBI report. Dimas, if you can, unmute and give us your 2 cents.
Well, it seems that these commissions and commissions of inquiry into one of the worst crises that Kenya went through, for example, post-election violence, which prompted us to look at our judicial system, right? Prompted us to look at our policing system prompted us to look at what happened, what went wrong during the post-election violence itself. And these are the reports and commissions of inquiry that happened. And one other one that happened was the Kriegler one on elections itself. It looked at our history, it looked at our experiences, and came up with concrete proposals. Now, the reason that we find ourselves in a place where we are thinking of changing the constitution, and when I say we are, I'm not saying Kenyans, I'm saying some people are thinking of changing the constitution, is that we have not really implemented fully what these reports and these commissions of inquiry suggested. And so that we are now, it seems that we are going back to the systems that took us to 2007 in the first place. Let me give you the first example. The first example is that we are in a constitutional moment. We are actually thrust into a constitutional moment, but it is a constitutional moment that was occasioned by the executive and the opposition, but not the people of Kenya. You understand? So it's not people-driven as it should be. So if it's not people-driven, it should go through Parliament in terms of the what I think is in Article 255 that talks about how to change the constitution and when you need a referendum and when you don't need a referendum. But if it's a people-driven process, then why are we using the provisional administration, first of all, to collect signatures? Because that means it's the executive changing the constitution. You understand? But that aside, let's go to the ecosystem of our constitutional framework. The thing that has stood between executive and legislative excesses is the judiciary. The judiciary has been there when laws that infringe on rights have been passed, when the government decides to do things without public participation. And the judiciary clearly has been a thorn on the side of the executive and the legislature. And I think the BBI process brings about a situation where the judiciary is going to be captured. Because this judiciary ombudsman, as you pointed out quite eloquently, is an appointee of the president. Currently, the president can influence the vote of the PSC member, Public Service Commission member, the Attorney General, and the two representatives of the people, which who are appointed by the president, right? So it gives them 4 votes in the Judicial Service Commission. And then the judiciary itself has the Chief Justice, the representative of the Supreme Court, representative of the Court of Appeal, and a man and a woman from the High Court and the magistrates courts. So 5 votes. And then the Law Society of Kenya has 2 votes, a male and a female. Now, if you add the judiciary ombudsman, it means that the Judicial Service Commission becomes executive heavy, right? And this is a problem because it really takes us back to a time where the judiciary is beholden to the executive. And the executive itself, look at the amendments to the executive. The executive itself has been expanded, but even as it has been expanded, the president is given the prerogative to fire to fire the deputy president and the prime minister. What does that mean? The imperial presidency, a weakened judiciary. So basically, we are just back to the the pre-2010 framework, and I guess then we should ask ourselves, what was the BBI trying to cure? And for me, I think we need to be very clear that the problem that ails Kenya is first of all, we do not have electoral justice. Number two is that we subvert the rule of law. And number three, it is impunity, whereby we don't care what happens to us, especially if we are in the executive. So if it were up to me, the BBI should start with, first of all, good faith in terms of forcing us to look at which court orders have we not obeyed. Can we obey them now? Which look at historical injustices. Can we address them without? We can address them without changing the law. We can implement the CJRC without changing the law. And so my takeaway is that we are changing the constitutional framework, yet we are not obeying the current constitutional framework. So what makes anyone believe that we will obey that constitutional framework that we'll have in future? And I guess I'll end it there. Yeah.
Thank you, Dimas. And we had a small scare there for your phone. We are glad that it's okay. We can still see you, so it means it didn't fall and shatter. My colleague Moses has a question for you.
Yes.
I'm sure you haven't seen him in a while. He's here. He has a quick question for you. Let me mute so you can ask.
Dimas, thank you very much for your presentation. And sorry for the scare. I was almost running myself. Those are the challenges that come with Zoom meetings. Otherwise, I just wanted to ask, I know you've done a lot of work in terms of policing, in terms of police accountability and human rights. And I just wanted to ask you about, there are several proposals within the BBI in terms of the establishment of the National Police Council, in terms of human rights policing, in terms of financial independence of the police, and also in terms of the issue about the Director of Public Prosecution. Do you think these proposals within the BBI will enhance police accountability and enhance human rights policing within the police? Thank you.
Okay, let me start with the ODPP, the Director of Public Prosecutions. The law as it is right now is very good. He has the power and independence to carry out his duties. Ideally, you could want to enhance those powers, but is there a need to do that? So I think it's a exercise that is not even necessary in the first place. The other one is putting IPOA, changing IPOA into a commission. IPOA's powers are laid out in law. No one is challenging those powers. IPOA's independence is laid out in law. No one is challenging those powers. So why put it into a commission? It seems like it's a good thing, ideally, but it's not quite necessary. Now, the big thing here is the National Police Service Commission that wants to be repealed, which means it's going to be abolished and replaced by the Kenya Security Council. The Kenya Security Council is chaired by the Cabinet Secretary of Interior, and there are other members, and then the Inspector General, and 2 officers nominated by the President. What does that mean? That the National Police Service will be headed by the Inspector General, and the and the body that the council is the Inspector General of the Police Service, chair, and then it is chaired by the Cabinet Secretary, and then the membership is the PS of Interior, and 2 senior police officers appointed by the President. So it means it is also a very executive-heavy commission that is mandated to take care of human resource issues of the National Police Service. Basically, taking us back to the pre-2010 situation where the executive was the mother and father of the police, which meant that the police were designed to protect the regime. So it means that people could not, especially people who are opposition operatives, investigative journalists, public intellectuals, could not express themselves, they could not organize, could not meet. And then they were arrested, they were tortured, because the police was an extension of the executive. If you look at the Ransley report, it specifically specifically called for an independent Inspector General with financial and operational independence. Right now, the Inspector General does not have authority to incur expenses, right? So it does not have power to budget, allocate, or reallocate. It is the Ministry of Interior that does that, which is actually unconstitutional as we speak. And the reason I'm talking about this is that BBI does not address the unconstitutional things that are happening right now, and it wants us to create another regime without addressing that. And so if we look at the policing ecosystem, you realize that that we are just steadily backtracking to where we were, where human rights violations were rife, where civic space was throttled, because the executive did not have anyone to challenge it. So look at what has happened to, what is trying to happen to the judiciary, then what is happening to the police, and then the legislature, where MPs can join the cabinet, which means that they can be, someone can dangle a carrot to MPs. And already we have these seats such as the CAS seats that are not constitutional. They are not anywhere in the governance structure. If you look at it, what does BBI say about it? Nothing. It just proposes a new system without solving the problems that we have right now.
Right. Thank you, Dimas. I think now we can, with those remarks from our discussants and the presentation that was made, I think now we can go and take questions. I think even as we take questions, something that should be at the back of our mind is, what should civil society do during this period? Should we take no position and just focus simply on civic education? Or should we take a position on it? Secondly, should this particular meeting consider concluding with a position on whether we accept or reject BBI? So even as we have this plenary and discuss, we should have those 2 questions in the back of our minds. So now we will open up the floor. As we did earlier, if you have a question, you can raise your hand in the chat section, or you can just, because I don't see any hands right now, so you can unmute and just ask your question. All right, I don't see any questions or hands raised. I do believe that I am looking at the right place. Yes. There are no questions there. So I will quickly then ask the question to the two discussants. Should civil society take a position on BBI, or we should focus on civic education? Both to you, Dimas, and to Martin. We can start with Martin. The next question is, should this meeting, and I would say should this particular breakout room, because we have control over the breakout room, take a position, or should this be left to further discussion? Over to you, Martin.
Thanks, Julie. So I think civil society should actually take a collective decision on the numerous proposals in this BBI document, and that's premised on the fact that most of those documents, most of the recommendations that are proposed in the entire document and its opinion, I think it would be nice to stand on this. And if you remember, from the onset, when this process started, there has been a huge element of lack of inclusivity, lack of public participation, just to mention but a few. And even the composition itself, it looks like an elite club of a few henchmen of the true principles. So, and it's not, and the findings itself are not reflections of what Kenyans want. So I strongly feel that civil society should actually take a stand, and their stand should be based on the various retrospective recommendations of the document in its entirety. In terms of sensitization, I don't think actually civil society should spend any energy sensitizing citizens on an illegal document, because that will just be aiding and abetting the government's agenda. I mean, personally, in my personal opinion, or I think civil society should actually spend time rejecting this document, but not actually making it popular. Because you look at the propositions and you ask yourself, are these taking us forward, or are they taking us 10 steps backwards? In my opinion, I feel we're heading 10 steps backwards. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And before Dimas, you come with your proposals on the same, I see we have a hand up from Godfrey Kipsoi. Godfrey, just unmute. You can turn on your video if you can and ask your question to whichever panelist. Myself, Martin, Dimas, we're all here. So you can just shoot your question and one of us will address it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Juliet. So maybe anyone can. Mine. It's more of an opinion that a civil society, for some time now, we've been talking about shrinking space to sell a narrative. I agree with Martin that we should not spend resources to popularize PPI, rather than maybe we can, if we have resources, let's use those resources to CSOs craft a narrative, and then we sell the narrative. That maybe at the moment these are our position as CSOs. So we need to take a firm stand that unless some issues are rectified in the same PPI, once we approve it, we are going like 2 or 5 steps behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very valid opinion. I appreciate that. Anyone else? Just do the same thing. Raise your hand and mute your microphone. Give us your opinion.
Especially talking, I'm Rosalie, looking at the issues, especially of the widowed community, particularly widows in Kenya who've never been included in any policy making, mechanism. This is a first constitutional moment. I think it would have been very important for the BBI to include that voice, to include the issues in policy gaps with the harmful cultural practices that continue to happen in our communities even to date, that deny women their rights to even till their land. We know the disinheritance cases, so if the BBI is not inclusive of that voice and especially looking at the widowed community. If there's room to have that voice heard and be included, then it would be really important to the widowed community. But as it is a document that is leaving us behind, as we've always been left behind.
Thank you very much, Roslyn. Powerful position there, and indeed, I agree with it completely. Anyone else? Anyone else? I note that we have 11 minutes remaining, so this discussion will not proceed for much longer. So if you do have an opinion on whether we should go in a certain direction as regards BBI, I think this is the right time to make your voice heard. Okay, then I'll quickly turn then to Dimas, your 2 cents on whether this should be a document that we popularize and create civic education on, or take a position, yes or no. Do you agree with Martin's proposal that as civil society, first of all, we shouldn't even give this document due time because it would essentially be aiding and abetting an illegal and unconstitutional process that has been thrusted upon us and is literally hell-bent on making us pick a certain direction? So your thoughts on the same?
Kenya has had certain constitutional moments. The negotiations in Lancaster House before we got independence. 1992. So before 1992, when Section 2A was repealed, that now brought us back to multi-party democracy. 1997, 98, the IPPG process, which allowed us to change certain fundamental laws that allowed us to go to a peaceful election in 2002. And 2008, after the post-election violence, which caused the constitutional review process in 2010. But in between, there have been constitutional episodes that were forced upon us, right? So 1965, when is it 1965 or 64, when the Senate was removed, and then we got an imperial presidency. When Section 2A was introduced that removed multi-party democracy, and 2005, which was actually a constitutional moment, but was hijacked by the executive, whereby we had a bombers draft, and they went and sat down and wrote the Kilifi draft, also called the Waki draft. And I think we are in that moment. We are in that moment where the powers that are prevailing right now want to change the constitution, and the other peripheral things are the things that they are using to dangle to us, to attract us. For example, there's a youth commission in the BBI that has no basic, has no fundamental function except recommending things to other government bodies, right? You realize that all commissions have investigatory powers, have quasi-judicial powers, but this one is just there and it has some youth, like this, I think they say for at least 4 members have to be youth, and then they just recommend things, right? So I do not think that this document should be supported by anyone, but then we are in real politics where we might have to make a choice, right? In terms of whether you say yes or no. And I think civil society should just be neutral. And by saying neutral, I mean neutral politically, but say the truth. And the truth is that this document does not help us. What would help us is full implementation of the current constitution. And the speaker who spoke about the the concerns of the widows. You see, the BBI process was initiated by two individuals who are political heavyweights in Kenya, and then they selected a panel of experts or elders who basically are their allies, and then they wrote a document, and then which was released last year, and then that document was circulated. I don't know how, and it came up with what we have right now. This was not a process like the constitutional making process that we went through between 2008 and 2010, where delegates were sent into bomas to sit down to discuss, and then a committee of experts came up with, mandated by the people of Kenya, came up with proposals that now culminated into the 2010 Constitution. Thank you.
All right then. Thank you very much, Dimas. I completely agree. As civil society, we have a role, which is to educate. So this is one of those forums where we educate. We speak about what is in the document, which is what exactly they have written, whether or not it's substantial. That is our role to educate the Kenyans on, because unfortunately, this is a process that is hijacked by persons with personal interest. And we need to now unravel and unpack what is the BBI and what it means, because as you said, there are certain carrots that are being dangled to appease persons and to bring people closer. But at the same time, are these processes possible without necessarily going through a constitutional amendment process and by simply implementing the document that we have? I think that this has been a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for participating. I do believe that now we shall go back into the bigger plenary to continue with the discussion. So for now, you can take a health break, walk around, answer those phone calls, make those phone calls, respond to the texts, and then we can then go back to the bigger plenary. Thank you so much. Ms. Orwa, I see your proposals in the chat section. Creation of the Office of the Widowed Persons at the county and national level, repealing and creating our new laws at both national and county level to outlaw regressive widowhood practices, the adoption of proposed widow charter by the national and county governments. Our rapporteur, who is on the line, will pick these wonderful proposals and put them in as discussions that ought to have taken place in the preparation of the BBI report. So from us, thank you so much. It has been a wonderful pleasure. We will be able to circulate the report through TISA and the organizing committee, which shall then incorporate the bigger report so that it can go into a big report. But yes, we shall be able to share our materials that we have referenced. So thank you, everyone.